Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Cookbook. I'm your host, Iris Goldfeder, and I am super excited about our guest today, Angie Klink. I've known her for like a gazillion years, and we were talking a little while ago, and I said, I think you'd be an amazing guest on the podcast, and so I'm going to read Angie's bio and bring her on. She's pretty awesome. Okay. So, Angie Klink is a freelance writer and author of 12 books, many about Purdue. She is a historian, biographer, essayist, scriptwriter, and copywriter. She has written for the American Writers Museum and Ms. Magazine. Ooh, I didn't know that. She's published in Traces of Indiana and Midwestern History Magazine, published by the Indiana Historical Society. Her essay about Amelia Earhart's time as a faculty member and women's career counselor at Purdue will be in the 2024 anthology Fast, Famous Women, published by Woodhull Press. Klink was the scriptwriter for two documentaries narrated by actor Peter Coyote, the public education film Rise Above the Mark, and Eternal Flame about Tom Kelly, member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Her most recent books are WBAA, 100 Years as the Voice of Purdue, and Pledge and Promise, both published by Purdue University Press Scholarly Publishing Services. In 2024, Klink received the Excellence in Historic Preservation Medal and Certificate from the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. This is a hell of a bio, Angie. The most prestigious preservation award the National Society presents, the Dar Historic Preservation Medal, honors an individual whose volunteer service, promotion, and dedication to historic preservation has made a distinguished contribution on the national, regional, or state level for many years. The certificate recognizes and honors an individual who has done recent, remarkable volunteer work at the community level. The award recognizes achievements in all areas of historic preservation, including publishing books. Klink writes and presents about the late author, poet, and artist Eveline Stein, 1863 to 1923. She's the energy behind the application, fundraising, and emplacement of a 2024 Indiana Historical Bureau marker honoring Stein's life and literary contributions placed at Stein's former home in Lafayette, Indiana, located across the street from where Klink resides. Klink has received 61 American Advertising Federation Addy Awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Honor. I didn't know that. Congratulations. She received the 2022 Outstanding Service Award from Purdue Fraternity, Sorority, and Cooperative Life for authoring the book Pledge and Promise. She was honored as a 2023 Salute to Women of Distinction by YWCA Greater Lafayette. I was there and I cried. That's all I'm going to say. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Klink is currently, that's when we reconnected, because I saw
it. Went to lunch, and it was great.
Yeah. Klink is currently serving on the City of Lafayette Bicentennial Committee, planning year-long events to celebrate the city's 200th birthday in 2025. Woohoo! She's a former member of the board of directors of YWCA Greater Lafayette and the National Women's History Alliance, the organization behind the founding of March as National Women's History Month. A 5-time attendee of the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop. Okay, Irma Bombeck is like my spirit animal. At the University of Dayton, Klink received an honorable mention in the Irma Bombeck Writing Competition. She holds a BA in communication from Purdue University and lives in Lafayette, Indiana. Learn more at angieklink.com. And without further ado, welcome Angie. Okay, podcast is over, everybody. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. No, I think my camera moved.
Oh, you're fine.
There we go. And my camera just fell over.
No, you're fine. Well, I have like this thing that's here. Okay, there we go. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today.
No, welcome. Well, like this says, I saw, I was at the Salute to Women, and besides the little girl who sold the show, because she was just adorable, accepting the award for her mom, you were, I had no idea. I was sitting there like slack-jawed. Because we've known each other for a long time, but we never really like knew each other. And then it was like, oh my God, we need to like have lunch because you're just amazing. And so thank you for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us about Angie.
Well, you already heard a lot.
Besides this piece, everybody knows that piece. But like what was the impetus to really get you to be involved in women's history and all that? Because I think that that's such a huge thing now, especially nowadays, with a lot of the, they're trying to pull to kind of silence women. You're the voice for women and women's history. So I think that that's huge.
Well, the first book I wrote, which was about two women at Purdue, I completely, stumbled into. I had approached this new director of Purdue University Press with an idea actually to write a book about Amelia Earhart and her time at Purdue. So far, nobody has bitten on that one. That was in 2009.
Are you listening to that audience? Because that's a hell of an idea. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, universe. But anyway, but he wants to see me. He wants to meet with me. I'm like, oh, good. The only thing I had written at that point were my children's book, which is Purdue Finds His Hammer. So I go into his office, and the first thing he tells me is, we don't have money to pay authors. You would have to find funding for your Amelia Earhart book. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm thinking, why am I sitting here? Well, it's because he had funding for another book. Dean of Home Economics Emerita, Eva Goebel, was about to turn 100, very, with a woman, but she had for many years, I found out later, had wanted to put up money for a book to be written about Mary Ellen Matthews, which there's a building named after her, one of very few on Purdue's campus. And I stumbled in there, and he goes, that very day, he said, we don't have much about her because her papers were burned. I'm like, okay, so we're going to add this other woman, her contemporary, Lilla Gaddis. I'm like, okay. And he goes, there could be more about her. Okay. And he says, would you want to write that book? And no one had ever asked me. I just said yes. I'm like, I really didn't even know what I was stepping into. But it turned out to be more than I ever imagined, because I discovered some diaries of the sister of Lilla Gaddis, who was a teacher, an elementary teacher, and she wrote about Purdue events and world events and community events in line-a-day diaries that I followed her and used excerpts, and it just took it to a level that no one was expecting. It was almost like, let's get Eva Goebel off our back. She wants to give money for these two women to have a book. And then when I wrote it, they were like, this was better than what they thought. They didn't say those words, but I knew that, and I'd still that's launched me. And then I've since then published many books with Purdue Press. So that was how that happened.
And it's so, again, it's just so important, because a lot of women's history, as we just discussed, is not recorded. All the things that the men did are recorded, but a lot of the things that the women do.
Yeah. And the fact they said her papers were burned, what was that all about? I don't even know. She had no children. Yeah. Yeah. There.
Wait a minute. Is that?
But, a lot of the women have no children because you couldn't be married and have these sorts of careers in the early, through the 60s, 70s, really, in the 1900s. So they weren't married. They didn't have children, no one to look at their legacy and keep it going and keep it alive. So that's another, part of the equation.
That's just, gosh. And I was talking to somebody actually last week. Actually, it was Michelle, and we were talking about how, women couldn't have a credit card before 74 in their own name.
Yes.
And it got started by 6 women, I think, who started a bank and raised X amount of money. So I think it's so important that women's stories get told, especially in light of the way that you do it, because it's very historic and it's very factual and it's very
Yes, and I try to write it like you would a novel, a creative nonfiction. Bring in the landscape and all the five senses, and make it beyond just
Right.
facts. So I weave those in.
Yes.
In between.
Well, I mean, yeah, and you do it so well. So, Eveline Stein. Let's touch on her a little bit, because I just got goosebumps when I looked at it, and the thing that kind of got me was, come on, computer. Oh my goodness. Okay. You ever have one of those days when technology works and then everything just like disappears? Oh, yeah, here it is. It's like not letting me. There we go. Come on, work. I read the, I'm just going to pull it up in your email because I have it sitting right here. What she wrote above the fireplace. Peace and joy, come sit beside this our hearth, and here abide. And in the old English, like with the exclamation point, share our firelights, rosy gleams, bless our little house of dreams. That's just so lovely. So let's talk about Eveline Stein a little bit.
Well, I had heard for years that this small house across the street from where I live in a historic neighborhood of Lafayette, Indiana, and neighbors had said, well, one time this famous author and poet used to live there. So I walked my dog past there, and so it's been decades, that this has happened. And I recently, my husband and I became a member of what's called Parlor Club, which is also a very old established club in our community. And it's a literary club where people present papers and have discussion topics. And Eveline Stein, come to find out, was the designated poet laureate of Parlor Club. And she was a member, and so was her mother. And so I've always wanted to learn more about her. And I did write a short blog for the American Writers Museum, as you mentioned in my bio that I've written for them. But I wanted to learn more. So I decided, I was just by happenstance asked to write my first paper to present to Parlor Club because someone else couldn't do it, because normally your first year you don't present. So I decided I'm doing Eveline Stein. I go to our historical association, I do research, and I write my paper. So I learned a lot more about her. And she was part of what was called the golden age of Indiana literature, where in Indiana they were really concentrating, lifting up the writers, because there were so many. There was George Ade, there was Wallace, who wrote Ben-Hur from Crawfordsville. There was James Whitcomb Riley, who is known as the Hoosier poet, but he was known nationally and traveled all over. Well, he was a mentor of Eveline Stein's, and there are letters preserved in the Tippecanoe County Historical Association of their correspondence. And he really encouraged her writing. And so that was, so we always hear about those men that were her peers. And she was like the only woman of that group. But we don't hear about her. Wow. Duh. So anyway, so that was my mission. So I wrote it and I had done all this research, so I submitted it to the Traces of Indiana and Midwest History magazine, which the Indiana Historical Society publishes. And they published it. That was the next step, and it just kept snowballing. Finally, I thought, I have all this research, which is what it takes for an Indiana Historical Bureau marker to be placed on a site. So I thought, I'm going to use everything I have. I applied for that, for it to be put at her house. And there's other people live there now. I mean, it's a couple that actually portrays Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus. So, but, awesome. So it was approved. It just kept going. I used what I'd had. And so now we're in the throes of the final plans of the dedication of the marker. It's been created. It is delivered to the community. And on Thursday, May 23rd at 5:30, we're having a dedication of the marker just across the street from where I live. And we have the mayor will speak, and we have different, a 30-minute. And then afterwards, there's a dinner at the Lafayette Country Club. And Winter Ball, who actually grew up behind in the gorgeous Ball mansion. If you're from our community, everyone knows the Ball family mansion. It's just gorgeous brick on 9th Street. Well, very close to where Eveline Stein lived. So Winter Ball, who grew up there, has always been an Eveline Stein fan. And she's like 92, Winter is, and has a private collection of Stein's artwork, because she was not only an author of like middle grade books and poetry that mostly for children, she also was an artist, a watercolorist. And Winterball has this collection. So it'll be at the dinner after, and that's an RSVP, limited seating dinner. So it's become, that is everything that's happened thus far with
Is the dinner sold out? Can I get tickets? I mean, how does this?
It's not sold out. In fact, we just are now sending out the invitations. So yeah, tickets are still available right now.
Because I don't know if I'm on the list.
I will send all
that would be amazing.
Yes, I would love to
especially after knowing all this. So,
yes.
So how did you? Because if Mr. and Mrs. Claus live there now, which is just freaking hilarious. I mean,
but here's what's so funny. Evelyn Stein's one of her first little fictional stories for children was first published in what was called St. Nicholas Magazine back in her day, which, she died in 1923. So at age 60. Oh, wow. And so I hadn't made the connection, but when I told, it's Margie Wolzak who lives in the house now, about that, she goes, "Oh, that's so perfect. How appropriate, because, we're Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus." And I had not even made the connection, but, all sorts of woo-woo going on around here.
There's a lot of woo going on here. I mean, I have like goosebumps.
I know. So it's very special. In fact, I can so relate to Evelyn's life, obviously, because I am a writer myself and just sitting across the street from where she wrote. So it is very much connected. I just feel like I have to be, because she had no children. She was never married. So it's the same story. No one, and now all of her works are in the public domain. They can be, published here and there willy-nilly, and she's not getting hardly any credit. So I can relate to Evelyn Stein. I don't want that to happen to me.
That's not going to happen to you.
They're going to have, their job.
That is not going to happen to you. I can guarantee that. So what did you do before you wrote? Because now you're on this entrepreneurial writer story. So what did you do prior to that?
Well, I wrote marketing. I started out at WASK Radio right out of college and wrote 30 and 60-second ads, which was a great beginning because you have to be very concise, get to the point, be creative, all in 30 and 60 seconds. And then I evolved to print media as a freelancer and started to have my kids, and then, all sorts of print, from billboards to, direct mail and then I TV scripts. And then I took a class called Writing from Life from a local well-known writer, Kathy Mayer, and that changed my life because I started to write.
Is she still around?
No, she passed away a few years back. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh my God. She had lung cancer. It was very quick. So I know. I think of her often. And there was a little book of her poetry published posthumously after she died.
Because I always drive by her house on Erie, or what was on Erie. Oh, crap.
Oh, you're thinking, did I say Matter?
Oh, Kathy Mayer. I was thinking Kathy Matter.
I don't know if I may have said
I think I was thinking the wrong one. Okay.
Matter is very much alive.
Good. Okay. So, I'm sorry for Kathy Mayer. I didn't know her though, but Kathy Matter. Okay, good. Kathy, if listening to this, she's going to be like, "Thanks for killing me before my time."
Anyway, wherever I was. I took that class, Writing from Life, and began to write essays, so longer pieces, longer than 30 and 60 seconds. And Writing from My Life. And many of those were published in Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I'm in several of those. And then I wrote my children's book. My son, gave me inspiration for that. And then you heard the story of my first biography that I wrote for Purdue. So that was the progression.
And when you did the salute to women, you talked about your family. I think that was the thing that got me, hearing about, your mom and your grandmother, and, so that was just amazing. You did all that. And then what made you decide to become an entrepreneur? Poof.
Well, actually, when you write a book, especially when I self-published Purdue Pete Finds His Hammer, which is a lift the flap book. And Pete, the mascot of Purdue, is looking for his hammer, which he always carries a hammer. He's supposed to be a Boilermaker. So the premise is that he's lost his hammer, and the child is helping him look at through campus landmarks for his hammer. So being such a niche, it's Purdue Purdue people who want this book, that I self-published it. So that I automatically became an entrepreneur. I hired illustrators. I acted as the creative art director because they weren't from this area. So I had to make sure the landmarks looked like the landmarks and I wanted a really gorgeous, endearing Purdue Pete, because the Purdue Pete can be scary for kids. And this Pete is fantastic that Larry Moyer did. So obviously, then I had to find a printer. R.R. Donnelly printed it because it's a hardback book and it has flaps. I made it more difficult because my kids always love lift the flap books. So then I had to find a printer who could do that. So obviously I just had to, and then there was licensing to use Purdue images and logos. So that was like, Medicaid forms or something. But so there was a lot there. And that's a step in a lot of books that you don't have, so that was an added step. So anyway, then ordered 5,000 was the first order. And those all showed up. That's when we owned a drugstore. So all at our loaning dock at our drugstore where they were stored. So once you have 5,000 books show up, you start selling. And so, of course, that's my other hat, the marketing. I love the marketing part. A lot of authors don't like that part. But so the whole kit and caboodle was mine, from writing this rhyming verse, which was the easiest part, to actually seeing it show up at my door. And my kids were fairly small then, or young, and they watched the whole process. And that's what also made it so special. The first time that a small box, when they were first printed, showed up at the door, and they were both home, and we unwrapped that box, and I'll start crying when I talk about it. But, they had watched me, and there were ups and downs, that happened. And they watched the whole process, and we sat on the floor and opened it, and I'll never forget that. It was very special, and I think they'll always remember it too.
Wow, that's a hell of a memory. I mean, yeah. So,
in fact, I would call it, really every author has to be, in some sense, an entrepreneur, because a publisher only does so much when it comes to marketing. It's less and less all the time. So you have to be the one. No one else is going to care as much as you do about your book. So I was thinking, when I was looking at your questions that you potentially would ask, I'm thinking that we're authorpreneurs.
Look at what you just said. Well, I work with a bunch of authors. We actually just are starting this. We have an author website template that we're doing, because there are so many authors out there that just need like a 3-page website, and they don't know how to do it. Yes. And so we're doing that. And it was just one of those things that I literally fell into. Anyway. So where was I going with this? What did you say right before it?
Well, they're
entrepreneurs. So that's like a perfect, you should like trademark that, because that's like an amazing.
I was just thinking that,
I'm doing a talk to them next week, and I'm having because I talked to them last week about SEO and just like marketing in general, right? On how to get their book in front of people, right. And some of them only have the book. Some of them have like a book and they speak. Like a lot of speakers now have books, right? And some of them have like the one that I'm working with now has like a cooking show. And she put the cooking show on hold so she could write her book, which was really interesting because it was about women ranchers in Alberta, Canada.
Oh, wow.
It's a trip. She's amazing. And I'm very blessed and grateful to have that project. But I love the entrepreneur thing because it's so true, right?
Yes. And you mentioned the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop. Well, I came back from it 2 weeks ago. So I've actually been 6 times. And there were some sessions on marketing and how so many authors don't like doing it, and tips and all that, for social media, which social media makes it so much easier, of course, in my opinion. Without that, it would be so much more difficult. But a lot of people don't like social media. So, but it was a really good conference because I also have a memoir that I am trying to get published, and it's about my mother's life and my grandmother's. You mentioned how I talked of them in my thank you speech at the Y Salute to Women.
That's what had me crying.
Well, they neither one graduated from even high school, and so me, college graduate writing all these books for a major university is just beyond.
You're giving me goosebumps again, Angie.
So, yeah. So I actually pitched an agent. I've never done this before. They had 15-minute pitch sessions for $50. And I met with an agent that I really liked. And she asked me to send the manuscript to her. So I'm waiting to hear back on that. So that was all good.
I know a lot of people in publishing now. So.
Oh, well, there you go. All right, we can talk.
It's been amazing because, my business has evolved like over the last 2 years, and you talk about woo things happening, right? The people that I meet help the people that I meet. It's just been this round, full circle. I don't know. And I'm just going, whatever you're doing, whatever vessel I am for this, okay, but that's what's been happening. So we'll talk after. I mean, I think, entrepreneurship. Now you can have me saying it, entrepreneurship. I'm like, what the hell am I talking about? What's my show about? But entrepreneurship it's difficult. And for an author, it's a little bit different. Than it would be somebody just starting their own business and starting like a service business. So, so you kind of did you still have a job while you were writing your book, or did you just stop and be like, I'm just going to start writing and that's it?
No, I've been a freelance writer most of my career. I have had stints with corporate, but for the most part, I've been freelance. So, and I really do better with that.
Most of my guests do. That's why they're entrepreneurs. And again, there's nothing wrong with corporate. It's just, I've had CEOs on here and they love corporate. Yeah. This is not to.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness, because we need them out there.
We need women in corporate. So that's, another story. But so what advice would you have for someone who's maybe thinking about becoming an authorpreneur or an entrepreneur?
Well, the first thing that I thought of when you had sent me some question ideas was that to trust your intuition, to trust your gut. Go ahead and get feedback from other people, if you're starting or, trying to lift it up, your business, but definitely trust your gut. And sometimes it's hard, because there's a lot of naysayers out there, especially in the writing world. So, and you just have to be willing just to keep at it. I don't know. It's hard being an author because the financial can be up and down, but it can be like that for any entrepreneur when you have a startup or whatever. So, but the one thing that I know I always think is not mentioned a lot for people who do startups or starting a new business is how do you survive without health insurance or benefits or, the financial ups and downs. It seems like I don't read or hear much about, well, how do you have health insurance? We're all supposed to be innovators and, but then there's that other side of the coin. So I don't know, maybe you do hear people talk about it, but I don't.
For me, my wife has benefits. So,
yes,
thanks to, 2012.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually what happens. You've got someone else to provide that. But I'm sure.
And I think it's funny. So I think that, and I'm just going to guess because I'm going to have a couple of HR people on here. So that are, entrepreneurs that could probably answer that better. But I think that, so for me, it was, okay, I'm on Heather's benefits. I'm good. There are other people that I know that don't have spouses, that were on what I was on before I could be on Heather's benefits. And it was called something like Luminos or something, and it's like the bare minimum. And then I think also that a lot of entrepreneurs are younger and they don't think about health insurance. Right. Exactly. So I remember when I was in my 20s and 30s, I never even thought about health insurance. It was I had I had something and I had to go to a doctor and I was like, oh, when I got there and they're like, do you have insurance? And I was like, what? No, I just need to see the doctor. And they're like, yeah, and so that was when I was like, oh, okay, I should probably look into whatever this insurance thing is.
Of course, it's all changed so much too.
100%.
World, so.
No,
anyway.
you're not wrong. But yeah, so, okay, insurance. That's a really good, nobody's brought that up before. So that's.
Yeah, I just, Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if I just have missed the memo or,
Yeah, no. Now, are you on your husband's insurance, obviously?
No. He's also a private consultant, but I'll have you know that am 65 and I just
Medicare, there
received
you go.
Medicare.
All right.
So I had to hold
That's
out and I
amazing.
made
Well,
it.
you look amazing. I'm gonna be 64 next
thank you.
month, and so I have like another year to go.
Yeah.
2 more to
Yes.
retire
So-
if they don't change it. Don't change it. I want my Social Security
Yes,
anyway.
please.
So
Yeah.
this is a whole different conversation. So what, I kind of feel like around here, and you're going to like go, oh, pff, whatever. But I feel like you're a local legend around here because, people here in Lafayette, know of you clearly. You were, on Salute to Women. That's a huge honor. And you don't get there without being very accomplished. But of course, when we're accomplished, we've also had pitfalls and obstacles that we've had to overcome, right? So what are some obstacles that you have overcome or that you're going through?
Well, the up and down financially is sometimes, you've got a project, it's paying well, and then you finish that project, and then it's like, okay, what's next? So sometimes that can be, on your psyche, can be a lot trying. But usually, about every time something does turn up. So I always have to keep that in the back of my mind that, well, every other time a new project came along, you know what I mean? So, and since my husband and I are both, consultant, quote unquote, it makes it rather difficult at times. But like I said, we're both happier as our own bosses. So there you go.
Which is important. I think it's all about, like, a lot of people that I know, like my friend Dr. Erin Baker, they wrote a book called Joyful AF. And it's all about, being joyful. And I think that as entrepreneurs now, I think in general, it's about being happy and being, like what makes us happy, what motivates us, right? Instead of having to go and toil for somebody else. For me, for years, it was like I was in sales and I was making everybody else money. And then it was like, why am I making you money when I can be making me money? Which.
Plus, I think when you're a creative person, which everyone has creativity. So if you're not feeding whatever that lane is for you, to me, it's miserable. And because like I said, I've had some jobs and usually they really didn't treat their people well. And I don't do well with that. And so I don't drink Kool-Aid.
Exactly. And I think that's like something that corporations are working on. A couple of my clients are leadership coaches. And they are, you can't teach somebody empathy. You can't, but you can teach somebody to be a kinder individual, and I'll just drop it, not be an asshole, because there are a lot of people out there that are employers, bosses, because they're not leaders, they're bosses. And I think that that's changing, especially because of COVID, because of the giant resignation. Everyone just got up and left companies.
Yes. And I think the current 20-some-year-olds, they just think, well, I'll just go get another job. They're not going to tolerate a whole lot of that, is what I'm seeing.
No. There's not a lot of loyalty either. So,
yes. Well, that's
which I find interesting, because if you have, so my wife works for a large local steel company, and they treat their people incredibly. She'll be there 20 years. And you don't hear of that anymore, right?
No.
And so
I will say I'm writing a book, just finished it, for a company in Poseyville, Indiana, which is down near the Ohio River near Evansville, Indiana. And it's a fifth generation as the CEO. It started out as a blacksmith shop, then a welding shop with 4 family members. And then this current CEO has expanded it. It's on its way to becoming national. And he had started writing a book about that whole process and the history of the family and the company, and got, kind of stuck. And so hired me to help, to write it basically with what he had worked with. And that their company culture is remarkable. And so his book, could be read by what you're saying, the people who are trying to train the other ones to treat their people well. So it's a guidebook in one sense also.
Nice. That's pretty cool. You have all these like books coming out. I'm gonna have like an Angie Klink library over here. God, I have like other. I'm not going to stick to my. It's funny because on here it's like there's questions that I try to ask everybody, but it's not always in line. So I just think of other things. So how have you been received as a female author writing historical stories about women?
Sometimes, and I think I touched this on my little speech I gave at the YWCA Salute to Women, but especially with the word historian, people still think it's a middle-aged man in a tweed coat. I think is what I said that night. So I still feel that. I know a lot about Purdue history, but they'll go to the man in the tweed coat. Like if they're going to write a story, they'll go to him first. But I think it is slowly changing because I get that more from either my peers my age or older, and the younger generation I notice is more accustomed to working with women. And I actually, I feel more respected when I'm working with younger people, to be totally honest. So that's a good thing. That's a good sign that the tide is turning. But, there has never been another woman who has written about Purdue's history. If you look at other books, 100 years ago, it was, the person who headed the Purdue Archives and Libraries wrote a history book, or, a male professor, wrote a history book about Purdue. So I'm the trailblazing author of Purdue University. So hopefully there'll be one, after me. So I got to start grooming her, whoever that is.
So if you're out there listening, so it's like right now you're a unicorn, right? I mean,
exactly. Which can be good and bad, it depends, but yeah.
But I mean, I think that you are looked at, I think, as an authority on just Lafayette history in general. I mean, yes, Purdue history, but Lafayette history, and I think that's one of the things that like blew me away about you was just that, all of the things. I mean, I'm from freaking New York, right? And I have to say freaking New York because, well, I'm from New York, but I'm from New York, and there's history and there's, rich history, and like Long Island has history and all that stuff. But, I've been here 20 years, which blows my mind. So I am officially, a Hoosier, and I am officially a Lafayettean. I don't know what the proper, vernacular for that is, but, and all that stuff like really interests me. Like, Fowler House is as haunted as that is. That's like another story, but I mean, the second I walked in there, I was like, oh, there's something in here. Like, yeah.
Oh, okay.
When I walked in there, and I went into the green room, and there's Eliza's and who's the I can always forget his name. What's his name? Anyway, Moses. Eliza and Moses.
Yes.
And I walked in there, and my friend and I were having lunch. Actually, Michelle Kleinbrook and I were having lunch. And I walk in. Okay. And like her eyes, like it looked like they were following me, and I was like, okay, but I had like a weird feeling. So I said, can we move into the other room? So we moved into the other room because it just felt weird. So we leave, and I come back 2 weeks later, and we walk in the room with another friend, and her eyes were just looking like in a certain direction. And I was like, okay, I was right. Like, I know I was right. And then Marcia Gentry, I don't know if you know or remember her. She was a professor at Purdue. She was the reason that we started unmasking. But she got married there. And they said, oh, take a tour of upstairs. And oh my God, as I'm like walking up the stairs, and this is like, I don't know, like how many years ago, I walked up, I walked into the rooms, and I turned around and I came like right back downstairs. So, yeah, so I know that's that place is haunted, but that's.
Well, I would love to know that Eliza's still walking around there, because she had a building because she donated after her husband died, which happens a lot. Then the women get the recognition. She donated for this gorgeous building on campus, and there is still a Eliza Fowler Hall, which is just a little auditorium in Stewart Center, but it was actually a standalone gorgeous building that was torn down, and it was called Eliza Fowler Hall. So then when they built Stewart Center, which is there now, and so they just named this little auditorium after her, and her portrait is outside the door as you go in. So anyway, there's that too.
Interesting. I'm going to have to go there and see if like her picture follows me there. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge portrait.
Wow. So, okay. So next time we have lunch, we'll have it at Fowler House. There you go. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, I usually ask people what their differentiator is, but that's clear. So I'm not going to ask that. For like, what's your next step?
Well, I hope to get my memoir published, which would be definitely, it would be nice if it were a big name publisher, and we'll see what happens. But, it's a universal story, as memoirs are told, but through the personal. So, and then like I said, I have this Nix Companies in Poseyville, Indiana. That'll be coming out in the next year, I hope. And I'm actually working on Sigma Chi history. It's the older fraternity at Purdue. They're all in these various stages, So, those are, and definitely the Evelyn Stein, having the dedication. And so I'm teaching a class at Purdue. They have Grandparents University. I don't know if you've heard of it. I guess it's incredibly popular, sells out. And so I'm teaching a class and there's two like younger kids and middle grades kids, and you teach them in 2 days. They come with their grandparents. They spend the night in a dorm. And so my class is writing with an author, and I'm going to have them interview their grandparents and write a little story about them. So I think it'll be great fun. So yeah, I've got lots of different things, all the balls in the air. So.
That is awesome. I just think that everything you do is just really it's important work. And I'm glad that you're enjoying it, right? Because sometimes like we do stuff and it becomes a toil. And it sounds like you're really enjoying what you're doing. So I think that's really awesome. So for the people that are out there that, right now they're saying, okay, I want to write a book. Maybe I want to self-publish. And I think that self-publishing, because finding an actual publisher is really, really hard. And self-publishing. So, and you have self-published. So do you have any advice on that, or any tips or tricks or anything like that?
Well, I know there are many people who self-publish on Amazon, and I have not done it, but they've had success with that. I guess Amazon makes it easier than ever, but I don't know. I can't personally say if that's a good or bad thing. But definitely self-publishing is not what it used to be. It is, you can have a self-published book and it hit the big time. I mean, it used to be they'd call it vanity press. No more. And, it can be just as viable as if you had a big publisher. So, but there again, you got to be willing to do it all, get it printed. But there are also like Author House, which is in Southern Indiana. They do a self-published books, and they'll do as much or as little as you want them to. You can do your own editing, have somebody else edit that or they'll provide it, or there's all sorts of options. When it comes to designing your cover, they can offer that, or if you know someone who would design your cover. So there's so many options these days. So But especially like you said, an entrepreneur that goes out and speaks to also have a book is really advantageous.
Yes.
So, and that's, you got a built-in, way to sell your book. So, but there are a lot of options when you Google. So, and sometimes it's just overwhelming. But I think if you talk to other authors too, if they have an idea of what you want to do and they're doing the same thing, that's how to learn. I learn a lot from conferences, like going to Irma Bombeck. The energy there is so positive and so supportive. It's mostly women, but there are some men too. And the keynote speakers are like Anna Quinlan was the first night, and it's a fantastic University of Dayton, where Irma graduated.
Okay. And what about you as far as keynoting?
I might teach a class. I haven't done that if you mean at Irma.
No, just in general. I mean, you have all these books, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have. I have spoken a lot. Yeah. I've spoken a lot at like home economics conferences, because my first book, it was the Dean of Home Economics, in that book. And I have spoken a lot at Purdue events, women events, because the Dean's Bible is about the 5 women who handed down a secret Bible, and then they did all sorts of wonderful things for women students and faculty during the 20th century, when there were so many strides that needed to be made for women. So that's their story.
Talk about that for a minute. That's interesting.
Oh, yes, here it is. See, here they are walking. That photo is called 5 Deans Walking, and the Bible had belonged to the first part-time Dean of Women, Carolyn Shoemaker. When she died, Dorothy Stratton, who then became the captain of spars in World War II, she moved into Carolyn's desk and found the Bible and kept it. Then when Helen Schliemann became Dean of Women, Dorothy decided to write her name down and the date and pass it on to Helen. And so it went through all these women. And the only woman that's still living is Betty Nelson, a fantastic woman.
Wow.
She's right here. And she'd only been a dean of students by then, because they combined Dean of Women and Dean of Men. Only 2 weeks. They invited her for lunch, and the previous dean handed the Bible to her. She had worked with these women for more than 20 years, had no idea they handed down this secret Bible until that very day. So
wow.
That's the day that it was given to her. So it's quite a story.
That sounds amazing. Yeah.
So, I'm moving again.
So they that's like what the presidents do, right? They leave like little things for each other, like actual like presidents.
Yeah. Yes, I hadn't thought about that. You're right.
Yeah,
it is
that's really interesting.
So,
and I wonder, so did because there were 2 more female deans, right? Well, since I've been here, there was you'll know their names.
Yes, Brown was not. Her first name's not coming to me, but she's the one that actually, she had the Bible and donated it to archives, because it was 100 years after Carolyn Shoemaker's was first became dean. So it was kind of a good time, because by then the Bible was over 100 years old and it needed to be preserved. So that was when I was researching and writing the book. She donated it to archives, and that's where it is today. But on the back, there's a picture of the Bible, but I'm actually holding it in this author photo inside the jacket. It's kind of a, there we go. Nice. I'm holding it. And my son, Jack, took photos of it for the book. So inside the book, the photos were taken by my son. He was a student at the time. So, of course, he's a filmmaker.
I was saying, he's very accomplished. So, I mean, he's rocking and rolling now. So, so where can people find you? Yes.
Find me?
Or your works. I mean, you have a website with your works, and
you can read all about my books on angieklink.com, my website, and
where can they buy your? Can they buy your books on angieklink.com?
Some of them, yes, or it'll have a link to Amazon or wherever you can buy them. Pretty Pete finds his hammers at University Bookstore, in the store and online, or from me. Any of them are available from me. So you can actually, if you want it autographed, you can actually contact me.
Okay, so when we go to lunch next, I want the little Purdue Pete one. I'm going to give it to my...
okay. And I also don't tell Purdue, but I have an IU version. Because I have nieces and nephews who graduated from IU.
We are equal opportunity on this show, so,
Exactly. Our rivals go book to book.
My God, that's amazing. So what... We're almost at an hour. Is there anything that you want the audience to know, or is there anything that you want to say?
Well, I'll show you the very, very first book, Divided Paths, Common Ground.
Wow.
And it was about the first dean of home economics. She was the first female dean on campus, period, a faculty dean. And then the diaries. This is a picture of the diaries. So those are now also, because of this book, preserved in Purdue University archives. So, and then Kirby's Way is about the founders of Kirby Risk Corporation, which is a Midwest electrical supply company, but founded in Lafayette, Indiana. And Kirby was so quirky, such a philanthropist. Just there's no one else like Kirby Risk. And so this was lots of fun. Brian Lamb wrote the foreword in that book of C-SPAN fame. So, and he's a pretty
nice. Very cool.
Yep.
All right. So the last question that I ask all my guests is, what lights your fire?
Well, obviously writing does.
Clearly.
But you know what? Being with my family, my dog, I'm a simple person. Outside in nature, good conversation, a really good movie and a TV series. I like stories, compelling stories. So give me a good story. I mean, I either want to write it, live it, or watch it, I guess. Or read it.
Well, there you go. Too. I like that. Compelling. It has to be compelling. And I'm kind of like the same way. I like people, they'll be like, oh, you have to watch this comedy. And I'll be like, oh, no, that's not my kind of, like, I need like smart humor, not the slapstick stuff. That's just not my thing.
I agree with you. A lot of it's not.
My friends are like, you're a snob. I'm like, I'm not a snob. I just like, not that. So, whatever.
Yeah. I agree with you.
So, well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I think this is really awesome, and it's an honor, and especially after again, seeing you at Salute, that just it was just so touching. So, I can't wait for the memoir to come out so that people can hear the story that I heard. Except read it in full, because it was pretty amazing.
And the title is Limber as a Rag, which was an expression my mother said because she taught herself acrobatics, just in the yard and at the park, and kids would watch her. And she was telling me this as her walker sat next to her in her assisted living apartment. And she says, you wouldn't know it now, but I was as limber as a rag. So
you could try to make me cry again. Okay. Hang on. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience and I'll be right back.
Okay,
thank you. Okay, wow. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in for around an hour today. Really always appreciate you watching. Don't forget to like, share, download, subscribe. I know that this is on Apple TV and Roku now, so thank you for that. Share that with your friends. And, go find Angie's stuff at angieklink.com. Just amazing. I want to, I appreciate each and every one of you that are out there watching and listening and sharing. Keep downloading. Need more downloads. So keep downloading. Until next time, go out, find what lights your fire. See ya.